I'm Rosa Crumpton. I'm a registered nurse, and I just want to tell a little bit about my fibroid story. Back in 2013, I had been anemic. I was having a little bit of health issues, but nothing that really sent me to the doctor per se. Then one day I started having terrible, horrible cramping right around my belly button. Started having nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. It got pretty bad. I did not want to go to a hospital because, like most nurses, were terrible patients. And so my husband kept saying I need to go to the hospital or at least urgent care. And I was like, I'm just going to try to rest and sleep it off. About 9 o'clock that night, I was feeling horrible. By that time, I was starting to get dizzy. I was probably a bit dehydrated. And I finally said, please take me to the hospital. So we go to the emergency room because urgent care was closed at that time. And we get all checked in. They do my lab work. And they come back and they say, hey, you have pancreatitis. And I was like, what the heck? I really don't have any risk factors. I was a little younger than I am now. And they couldn't figure it out. I rarely drink. I wasn't taking any medications. Really didn't have any risk factors for pancreatitis, but my labs were clearly saying that's what I had. So they decided to give me a CT of my abdomen to check out and see what was going on. So the results come back and I'm still in the emergency room, with the little curtains, and they start telling me, oh my God, you have fibroids. They're huge. Did you know you had fibroid? Just rapid fire. And mind you, I'm on a morphine drip because that's how bad my pain was by that time. I'm getting some fluid. So I'm a little out of it. And I'm like, what does this, in my mind, I'm like, what does this have to do with pancreatitis? The pancreas and the uterus, they're not even that close, but I was also on pain medicine, so it was just kind of okay. But just rapid fire questions asking me if I wanted to have kids. Did I have kids? I better hurry up and have kids because these fibroids were terrible. And those of you in the medical field or who have been around the block, in hospitals, especially in the emergency room, they're trying to find what the problem is, a solution, and get you to the next destination. And that's just the manner of healthcare. But it was just such a bizarre experience because I knew that my uterus had nothing to do with my pancreas. So long story short, I ended up being overnight in the hospital. My lab values started getting better, and the pancreatitis will be a story for another day. I followed up with my regular doctor and we were trying to figure out the pancreatitis, but I also got the diagnosis of fibroids. Sent me to a specialist, an OBGYN. That first appointment was horrific. As soon as me and my husband walked in, there's babies crying. It was hectic, checking in, and it was just really unsettling. I had done a bunch of research before this appointment because if you know me, I am a researcher. That is, that was my career before I became a nurse, and that's just part of who I am. I try to figure things out, the how, the why. That's how my brain works. So I had armed myself with knowledge. I was not a registered nurse at the time. I was an LPN, but had a healthcare and research background. So I had done some pretty extensive research, found the different treatment options that were available at that time. And so I was ready to have a discussion, find out specifically how big these fibroids were, where they were located, and what the possible treatments were. So that is not how the appointment went. The doctor did an exam. Came back in the room, did not ask me, did I have kids, which I did not have at the time. I didn't have any biological children at the time. Did I want kids? What were my plans? Nothing. This man literally read from a pamphlet. I kid you not, a hysterectomy is the surgical removal of the uterus through an incision. And started telling me about how they could do it laparoscopic, and I'd be in and out. Now, mind you, I had never presented to my doctor's office, to the emergency room, or anything like that with fibroid symptoms. I found a happenstance that I had fibroids when I had a pancreatic pancreatitis attack. So it was very bizarre that this gentleman, this physician I had been referred to, was telling me about a hysterectomy, because that was never my chief complaint when I went to the doctor. None of the typical fibroid symptoms. But looking back, I had classic textbook symptoms. I had become anemic over a period of, shorter period of time. I'm pretty good about getting physicals and things like that. My periods had become longer, more irregular. I was starting to have clots, and feel very tired around my menstrual cycle. So I did have some textbook symptoms, but I never really put those together. And as many of you know, when you go to the doctor, even regularly, they just ask you when your last menstrual period was. They don't really ask you too many symptoms or anything like that. And I also knew, or I had been told that, if you gain weight, that sometimes that can make your periods heavier and things like that. So anyway, that appointment was horrible. I almost left in tears. And I am not somebody who likes to cry, especially not in a public setting. We barely got out of the appointment, and my husband said, you need to get a second opinion. You need to find, he had a whole laundry list. You need to find a Black, female, young doctor to get a second opinion. And I was like, babe, like we live in Washington State. Where are we going to find this magical, mythical OBGYN? But he spoke it into existence, and I actually found one who was an awesome doctor. So I went and saw her a few weeks later, and the appointment was night and day. The office was calm. There were pregnant folks there and babies, but the office itself was calm, and the check-in procedures. And then, meeting that doctor, she was very welcoming to me and my husband, and she went through every single option from doing nothing all the way to a hysterectomy. And she told me, if there is any inkling, any tiny little shred that you may want a child in the future, like, hysterectomy is off the table. And so I really liked her approach she gave. She told us, where the fibroids were. She, had a model and was showing me exactly where my fibroids were, how big they were, what the different treatment options were. And so it took going to that second physician. And that's who ended up doing my myectomy. I had an open myectomy also in 2013, so that I could preserve my fertility, because based on where my fibroids were and the conversation with that second OBGYN, we felt that was the best option to preserve the muscle integrity of my uterus if I were to get pregnant later on in the future. So yeah, that's just a little bit of the fibroid journey. And, as I've started to share my story, I've heard from so many other folks with uteruses that have had fibroids, very similar stories, where they were not really having the best experience. So I'll just say, to wrap this up. So that's just a little bit about my fibroid story. If you want to hear more about the myectomy or why I chose that or anything else, leave me a comment or a question, and I will answer that for you. Thank you.